Are you cracked in creative but struggle in actual games? Or do you feel like you've been stuck at the same skill level for a long time? If so, you've come to the right place. Timestamps are down below if you want to skip around, but we're going to start with the main reason people struggle in actual games. It's because actual games are obviously way more laggy than creative. Something you can do to mentally prepare for that ridiculous lag in an actual game and in tourneys is right before the tourney starts, just for like 10 minutes, switch to a different region and hop into free builds and just practice on that lag. This will trick your mind into thinking the tourney servers aren't even that laggy. You could just practice on laggier servers all the time, but me personally, I'm not going to be practicing on high ping. Zero ping just feels too good, even if it's not realistic to what I'm going to feel in a tourney. Something else you can do is just spend more time in ranked. I personally think creative is one of the best places to get better, especially with all the new creative maps out there, but being good at ranked is a really good skill to have, especially for like W King in a solo cash cup. If you're good at W King in ranked, you're probably going to get better at W King in solos. That's my advice for lag. The second thing I want to talk about is third parties. This is the other thing that creative players a lot of times don't know how to handle. The biggest thing I can say about getting used to third parties is having map knowledge is key. What I mean by this is knowing what areas of the map to avoid third parties, knowing what directions you might get third partied from at different points in the game. That way you can block off those angles throughout the fight. Having that map awareness is the biggest key to avoiding third parties. So here's my general tips. Avoid the center of the map if you're trying to take fights. Everyone rotates there, so everybody fights there, and you're gonna have third party after third party. But if you do fight in the center of the map, be ready to get third partied at any point in time. The best way to be prepared is if you're in an area where you think you might get third partied, just be blocking your angles at all point in time. So if you're pushing somebody's wall like I'm doing right here, build walls around you so that you're prepared for a third party. But I typically recommend avoiding that center of the map and fighting along the edges. So let's say I landed up here in the north region of the map and the zone pulls to the west. I would wrap around this west side of the map and rotate to all the named locations. Usually named locations are going to have players, so you'll still find a decent amount of fights, but you'll be avoiding the center of the map and avoiding the area where other people are rotating to, which will help you fight without getting third partied. Some of my highest kill games are by playing the edge of the map rather than center, because if you go to the center, it's just going to be shambles and you're going to be stuck in a fight for so long. Versus if you rotate around the edge of the map and you're good at 1v1s, boom, you can clean up fights really quickly and move on to the next one. That's pretty much how I handle third parties. The third thing I want to talk about in this video is if you're good in practice maps but not in fights, what you got to do is stop spending so much time in those practice maps. Those are really good for getting the mechanics of the game down and getting comfortable building, editing, shooting, all that stuff. But if you want to get better at fighting, you got to grind fights against good players. And once you get confident beating people in 1v1s, you can start moving into ranked and start grinding ranked until you start winning all your fights in there. Now I say this all the time, 1v1s is the fastest way to get better at fighting, only because you can take so many fights super quickly and start to catch on to those patterns that players do and how to piece control them. But more than anything, I recommend doing all-in-one 1v1s, and this is why. In an actual game, there's lots of different fighting scenarios you're going to be put in. Off-spawn fights, endgame fights, mid-game fights, fights for the island. All of these fights are going to play out differently. In the all-in-one 1v1 map, you can play box fights, build fights, zone wars, and realistics. So you're going to get the all-around 1v1 practice. Box fights are really similar to how you should play an early game with low mats and an end game when there's lots of people around and you got to play your boxes. Building up patience in box fights is one of the biggest keys. Not rushing and exposing yourself, but playing patient behind smart peeks and moving around a lot so the opponent has trouble keeping up. Realistic fights are obviously a simple 1v1 scenario. Build fights is plain and simple. If you ever get in a build fight, being good at build fights can help you have confidence in those situations. And then zone wars helps in those final 1v1 scenarios, or if you're taking height in a tournament. So if you can master the all-in-one 1v1s, you should be able to handle every scenario in game. But to build off that last tip, I have one of the most OG tips I ever said on my channel. This was probably one of the first tips I ever gave, and it helped me out when I was trying to transfer my skill from creative to arena. Like I said before, playing in that all-in-one 1v1 map will help give you confidence in different areas of your game, from box fights, build fights, zone wars, to realistics, normal 1v1s. but a lot of times people get nervous in an actual game because there's more on the line, you know? It might be a solo cash cup or a ranked game and your rank's on the line. My advice to get rid of those nerves is picture yourself in the 1v1 map in the specific scenario. So if you're in a box fight, picture yourself in box fights and start playing patient and behind really smart peeks just like you would in a box fight map. Or if you're in a realistic 1v1, take your mind off the game and picture yourself just in creative mode in a normal realistic fight. Or if you're in endgame, try to picture yourself in a Zone Wars match. I haven't mentioned it yet, but my final moving Zone Wars map, code down below, is one of the most realistic endgame simulators out there. If you just picture yourself in final moving Zone Wars when you're in an endgame, it might help you out. Back when I was new to competitive, doing this exact thing, picturing myself in creative, it sounds stupid, but it helped me out a lot, so it might help you out too. Now, I said the stepping stones is to start out in a practice map, then go to 1v1s, and then to ranked. But let's say you've been doing practice maps for a while and you just can't get faster. I've had people come to me and say this before, and don't feel bad, you know, Fortnite is a hard game, especially mechanically. Practice maps are meant to get down those mechanics and those muscle memories of like how to piece control, how to do retakes, how to aim, and it could be a lot. And one of the biggest things, if you can't get better in those maps, is I recommend switching up your settings. First off, you might want to try switching edit on release to either on or off, whatever the opposite is of what you have already. The second thing is try new sensitivities. If your screen is shaking a lot on mouse and keyboard and you over flick a lot, you definitely need to lower your sense. Or if you have trouble getting those concise movements on controller, then you might want to change your sense as well. For controller, I recommend copying pro settings until you find something that feels right. For keyboard and mouse, I do have a settings guide. It's a little bit old, but I linked it down below and it helps you build comfortable settings for you. I don't just flat out give you settings, I give you how to build good settings. So you can build off what you currently have, that way you don't have to switch everything. But the most important thing is to have your build binds and edit bind on a very comfortable position. If you have too much of it on one finger, that's not a good thing. And it makes it so that you have trouble moving while building and editing, that's also a problem. So check out that settings guide down below if you think your settings are holding you back, trust. The final tips I have for you to help you get those creative skills into the actual game are, first of all, stop trying to get so fancy. I don't know if all you guys try to do this, but don't focus so much on your mechanics. Spend more of your energy and more of your focus on the opponent. Try to track them during a fight. Pay attention to what angles they're trying to get on you so that you can block them ahead of time. I practiced this back in the day in 1v1s and in just actual games. I would try to build less and just focus on like listening to where the opponent is going and watching where they're building towards. And anytime I think they're about to try to take a shot on me, that's when I would build to block it. I did that for about a week straight, just trying to pay attention to the enemy, less on my own builds, more on theirs. And it helped me to start reading the opponents more often and predict them in fights. Obviously, don't just let them shoot you. You gotta still build fight them, but don't get so distracted in your retakes. Instead, just keep your eyes on the enemy. And the other thing is slow down. You don't need to be a little speed racer. Honestly, people that are consistent with their building, aiming, and editing at a slow pace usually outplay people who are just trying to be super fast but choke more edits. Long term, yeah, you want to try to speed up your gameplay, but at the start, focus on the fundamentals, set up good peaks, and play slow and methodical, and then speed up with time. I threw a ton of tips out in this video. I hope some of these help you out. Don't forget to check out the creative maps down below to help you on your journey, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.